Welcome, everyone, to the AI Metagame podcast. I'm Brandon Adams. I'm here with Nate Silver and Raf Michalowski. We have a fascinating topic today. We're talking about AI slop and the future of the content industry.
Nate loves it.
I don't think I'm on the slop side, but look, I've been in the content game for a long time, so I'm happy to provide my feedback.
Well, what we have today is a purveyor of slop, and one of the most intelligent purveyors of slop I've ever met in Raf. He's going to go through his process step by step and anti-slop, basically.
Thank you, Brandon. Thank you.
So, Raf, when we had dinner the other day and you were explaining the process of the AI slop industry, my mind was blown. Take us through how you got into AI video production, what the current state of YouTube is, what you think the future looks like a year from now. But take us from step one, if you can.
So I don't think any of this started with AI, right? Slop content's been around for a long time. And we can go back to Web 2.0, Google search. There were a bunch of sites like about.com, eHow, right? Which were, they were mass producing slop articles, essentially. And the articles would target keywords like how to get rid of bed bugs, right? And, these old purveyors of slop, right, knew that 1,500 people would search that specific keyword set in Google. So their whole game was, let me rank in the top 3, capture anywhere from 10 to 30% of those impressions, get those people to my site, to my page, monetize them with ads, right? That was pretty much the game. So Google killed that in the early 2010s, about 2012, I feel like. We used to do that, my team. We made content sites, right? Like, we've been in this game pretty much for 15 years. And I was telling Nate before, I own a big property record site, and it's the same type of idea, right? What can you make at huge amounts of scale to capture small amounts of traffic that nobody else is competing for, right? And then try to monetize that traffic. So with property records, for example, there's 150 million properties in the States. The site that we operate has a page for every single property. Each property might not get searched, but we're targeting those long tail keywords. So that's the same idea with this AI slop. When language models came out, the differentiation they created was you can now create content at scale for a very cheap amount, right? The guys in 2012 that were operating eHow and about.com, et cetera, they were paying Filipino or Indian writers maybe $15, $20 an article. And this was a big business, honestly, right? Yeah. Like, they were, I think they were owned by one of the big conglomerates, I forget. But Google killed them eventually, right? And that's kind of what happens. It's like, this is a big arbitrage play where you try to make as much money as you can, as quickly as you can, before you get blown out by whoever the platform is. So when language models came out, they allowed you to create content at scale, right? So the first thing we did was we went back to our roots. We started building out sites, right? And we learned that didn't work, right? We would try to find expired domains at auctions that would just target random keywords but had good link profiles. So an example would be a domain about dogs, right? Where we knew that the domain from Google's perspective was authoritative, right? So we started building out content for those domains. Didn't work. The other thing that we tried was building content for video, right? And that's where this whole YouTube thing came from. YouTube is a very interesting platform because it allows you to distribute content and monetize it the same way, right? And Twitter X is very similar, and that's where your post was, you were talking about the negative effects of slop, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the dynamic that these platforms create, right? When you have a system where you can distribute and monetize at the same time, you create incentives for slop, right? So I could keep going, or I don't know if you get.
No, I love it. So just to give listeners some background, I think at the peak you told me that you might have been responsible for 3% of daily uploads on
Yeah.
YouTube.
Yeah.
There's a
Personally,
lot of content on YouTube.
how many videos is that?
So we were pushing about 60,000 videos a day.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you break down the math, and I've done this before, it comes out to about like one every second and a half was being published. And I mean, it didn't start being that ridiculous, right? It started like, hey, here's this language model, we can build content, let's see what we can do with it, right? It was innocent, we were testing, and you know, we built one channel, and
What was the first channel?
So it was the property site that we owned,
Okay,
actually,
yeah.
right? So we're like, let's build a channel for this property site, and we'll create content related. And we thought maybe we could use this as a funnel for traffic back to the site. And it built a good funnel, but it also started monetizing, and that, you know, that one channel started making $5, $10, $15, $20,000 a month, right? So we're like, well, why don't we try doing 5 or 10 of them, right? So and then before you know it, 5 or 10 turns into, you know, a few hundred, and then you have 1,000, and you're building out, you know, infrastructure to, you know, sustain storing all the videos and uploading the YouTube API, and you know, you're realizing, oh, we're using OpenAI's voice model and it's costing us $0.015. Why don't we build our own? Because we're doing it at such big scale that, you know, we want to save money. So things just kind of like, you know, everything happened really quickly, right? And I had a really good team, and everybody, you know, everybody's kind of like the mindset of like, let's get this to scale as quickly as possible, right? And sorry, I forget where I was.
And you told me that the economics were roughly such that at the peak time, a video cost 1 cent per video, and it would make 2 to 2.5 cents in the first month, and often just keep making like 2 cents a month.
Yeah, the economics were, when we first started, the video cost was about $1.50 a video. We got it down to 0.7 of a penny. And I know it's so ridiculous, right? It's honestly, it's absurd. And 60,000 videos, right? And here's the crazy part about this. YouTube had to validate each single channel that we had. They had to give us an API key, because traditionally, if you have a YouTube account, you want to upload videos, they cap you at 5 per day or something like that, right? So to be able to use their API and upload 100 per day, a real person has to check your channel, say, okay, this is who I want to give an API key to, right? These guys are doing the right thing. And they just kept feeding us API keys, right? Over and over and over. So yeah, we were uploading 100 videos, or about 80 to 100, because usually 100 didn't get through. So 80 to 100 per day per channel. And there were about, at the peak, I want to say 800 or so. So about 60,000. It was $2 million a month.
And what was your relationship like with YouTube? I mean, they're making money as well, I guess, or like, are they? Yeah.
So the ad revenue, the way the YouTube revenue share works is it's about 50%. Right?
Okay.
Yeah. So Google captures 50%, we capture 50%.
Yeah.
And you have to build it up to the point where you can capture revenue, which is a lot of hours to get to that point, right? You have to have a certain number of viewers.
Yes.
And then you qualify.
Yes. Yeah. So for a channel to be monetized, you need to reach, I think it's 4,000 watch hours and 1,000 subscribers, which, you know, after a while, we kind of got that down to a science. We knew it took about 6 months to get there, and give or take 15 or 20,000 videos, right? And we knew that we could publish about 2,500 a month, right? So 6 to 8 months, let's say. And we knew the all-in cost, 0.7 of a penny per video, would break out to about, you know, $100 or $150 per channel. But once we had those videos monetized, each video would produce 0.7 of a cent per month, essentially in perpetuity, right? And
0.7 of it. It's like the gas station of like 4.29
yeah.
and 9 cents, right? It's the only time I've ever seen like the half cents or whatever.
So we were just, you know, picking up pennies off the ground, just at massive scale. and the math was great, but the tail risk was always that YouTube would shut us down.
But you kind of assume that you will get shut down at some point, or it's kind of inherent in the business.
So they were sending mixed signals.
Yeah.
YouTube, right? Like at one point they put out a notice saying, "Hey, their policy team, I guess it was, we know there's a problem with AI, with repetitive content or something of that sort, and we're going to target it." But then a week later, they would put out, a follow-up saying, "Oh, but we're not talking about AI," right? But they really were talking about AI. They just, I guess, kind of wanted to cover their bases. So eventually, that tail risk did hit, right? And before that, we were able to scale to 2 million videos, about low six figures MRR, right? And the thing was growing 15, 20% month over month, right? So we, if it didn't get blown out, we had a lot of runway, right? I honestly, if YouTube policy team did not take us down, I think we would have hit 7 figures a month easily.
Now, let me ask you, when you were at that peak, was it a situation so good that you weren't telling anyone about it? Or
Yeah. We were not, yeah.
It's like in sports or in markets or whatever. I always find if you have a good network, you hear about good opportunities, but you don't hear about the best ones.
Right. No, you want to keep your edge close, right?
So you wouldn't tell anyone about what was going on.
And we had a small team of 5 or 6 guys, and we made sure they didn't tell anybody either, right? Because we knew that it was so good and it wasn't going to last forever. Because nothing ever really does. I've done so many different types of businesses at this point in my life, and nothing.
No, people don't realize that, right? I'm on a different side of the spectrum as far as we publish. We charge $95 a year for a subscription, right? The lifetime value of a customer is several $100s, right? And we have actually quite a few subscribers, but But this is much more macro. But any edge in the media business, you have copycats, right?
Yeah.
If I build something smart, there's not any particular protection from someone ripping the idea off and doing a more slop version of the idea or a more partisan version of the idea, right? Mm-hmm. But you develop some confidence having survived many regimes of digital media, that maybe there's some intrinsic skill that you have.
For sure. And I would say, in terms of them not taking you down, you shared some of your videos, and it's not clearly slop, right? It's educational in some way.
Right.
So if you're, for instance, I don't know, doing a video on every named planet and star or something, it's weird, but it's kind of educating someone who wants to learn about those things.
Yeah. And that's essentially the content we were putting out. When people think of AI video slop, they think of the Mid-Journey type of videos, right? Where it's I don't know, Will Smith eating spaghetti, that. That's the classic one everybody thinks of. Ours were more question and answer format, right? So, and the whole purpose was to capture search impressions, right? So, if you're somebody, and what's the video I just showed you right before the start?
Christian weddings in Armenia or something. Yeah,
it was Armenian Orthodoxy. How is Armenian Orthodoxy different than Christianity or something like that? Right, that was the title of the video. And I mean, how many people in America do you think are searching that every month?
There's more Armenians than you'd think. Yeah.
But it's probably under 50, right?
Yeah.
But people are searching it, right? So they have to find that answer. And what are they going to do? They're going to either, at this point, they're going to read Google's generative AI, the snippet up top.
Is separately from YouTube enforcement, is that a big problem? Is Google preempting that with their AI snippets? Are people using ChatGPT?
I think most people at this point still are not using language models directly to get the answers to their questions. I think they're still going to search engines. And the AI snippets are definitely eating up a ton of impressions because all Google's doing is scraping all the content, right? And
hey, they're ripping off you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, they're ripping off me, who's using their models to produce my content. Right? So I don't know who's ripping off who, but
what other channels has your team considered aside from YouTube? Because a lot of your competitive advantage is in dialing in the pipeline, which must take a lot of technical expertise to get the cost of the videos down to 0.7%, and to be able to do it at scale. you must have considered trying other things. For example, I read about this student at UT Austin that made $20,000 having his AI OnlyFans things, AI generated content that way. But more seriously, there must be other things, Substack or any other platform where you're doing AI generated content at scale. What have you considered?
So we tested Instagram, not with the type of content, not with question and answer, just traditional, video content to see if we could scale accounts essentially, right? Because there's some value to an account if you figure out a formula to scale them, build them, and scale them for cheap. There's a market to sell them, right? So we tested it, and the problem with Instagram is you have the distribution, right? The content distribution, but you don't have the monetization. You would have to figure it out on your own. So, the process of building the content, building up the account, and then finding a buyer for it is a lot more work than just building content, publishing it automatically being monetized like YouTube does, right? So that's the beauty of these platforms, and Twitter is another one, right? Where people can build content and just get automatically monetized. And but these platforms, when they tie together distribution and monetization, they kind of create these perverse incentive structures, right? And you see that on YouTube. You see it on YouTube with me, right? And then you see it a lot on Twitter, where people operating accounts, they're not interested in spreading truth. They're interested in engagement, right? So that means rage baiting, saying things that aren't true, right? Anything that gets likes, retweets, comments, etc., right? And because that boosts their overall income, right, off that platform. So
it's almost like an axiom where if there's an economically viable niche to fill, somebody will fill it.
Yeah.
Right. In a capitalist system with 350 million people and a more or less open internet, Yeah.
It seems like a healthier setup on YouTube where the only people seeing your videos are people that actively want to see them, that happen to be searching for those obscure things.
Yes.
And then they're learning from those videos based on what I've seen. Whereas on Twitter, just the nature of engagement, they're showing the same fight videos over and over again,
right,
and things that you don't really want to see, but somehow they're...
Yeah. Twitter Slop is more rage baity and I would say not educational, right? Whereas YouTube stuff, because that, for your video to surface, somebody has to put up, unless you're going viral for some reason, right? Which happens on YouTube also, but your video, for it to surface, there has to be some intent, right? Somebody has to be searching a keyword related to that video title or a description or something like that. So
what do you think in terms of podcasting itself or YouTube video production? For a while with podcasting, it was new and it kind of had to be human, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas now we're almost to the point where you could push a button and have the Nate Silver podcast on this subject, or the Brandon podcast. It's not gonna be as good, but we're almost to a point where you could have the 80% version. Just here's what I want to talk about. Press the button.
Have you tried NotebookLM?
Yeah,
it has a tool where you can essentially you give it a topic, or I've used it once or twice a few months ago, and essentially it could produce a podcast off. You feed it a piece of content. You say, I don't want to read this. Turn it into an audio podcast for me to consume while I'm at the gym. And it'll do it. It'll do a really good job at it, but you have to feed it source content, right? So.
But I think, for example, on YouTube, there's this one guy, Julian Golden or something like this, and he puts out an AI generated video the moment that a piece of AI news is released. So OpenAI does the /goal command for codecs, and the moment it's released, there's a video of his AI generation doing
Really?
it, and he has a few 100,000 subscribers. The quality of his releases are quite reasonable, and I will watch them because it's the first thing out.
Yeah.
But it's
Does he have an editorial hand then, or it's just like all AI? Yeah.
He must be
He's-
listening to keywords or something and
So
ingesting and
I'm blanking on the guy's name. It's like Julian Goldie, but he's clearly optimized a process where when something is coming out, obviously there's a whole group of AI influencers, and a big market is to talk about whatever the new thing is, and to be a prominent AI influencer, you need to talk about the new thing, your take on the new thing,
Right.
within a day or two. But it's great if you can talk about it within 15 minutes. So he's got the process dialed down where he's got something out walking you through it, a demo, and it's him walking you through it
but is
very
it,
soon after release.
is it him or an AI avatar of him?
It's an AI avatar of him.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So what I haven't seen this, but send it to me after the
Yeah.
podcast. But it sounds like he's essentially blending like real content, like what we're creating right now, and AI slop, right? Which could be a winning combo, right? Because people like real content. But the problem with real content is we have to sit down for an hour and a half and film this and, and use our brains and talk. And
Yeah,
you
if
can't
like
do
an
it at
article
scale.
takes me
Yeah.
2 days sometimes. Yeah, I don't know, man. I do think that like there's going to be more of a premium in some ways on things that are real and verifiable, right? To get from an 80% version of yourself to 100%. I mean, if you're trying to like ask people to pay premium for paywalled content, right? Then they want to be sure they're getting the 100% version, I guess. But
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
But they're customers at every stage of the market, I suppose, right?
And this channel, whatever the guy's name is, Julian Goldie or whatever, he says at the start of the video, this is Julian's AI avatar. And the audience is in on the game.
Yeah.
This is him doing the best job that he can, going over this new tool as soon as it's come out
It's super
with
interesting.
the demo.
What you were saying though, Nate, right? Like you have a paid product,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously, yeah, your audience isn't gonna accept AI avatar content. They're not gonna pay for that, right? But what you could do is you could utilize that as the top of the funnel, right? Where you create at scale this content, the AI avatar content, and then you funnel, all that free content, all those users, all those viewers into your paid product, and that's where you create your real content, right? So that's probably the best way to utilize it. Right?
Look, so it is true that like it's getting harder to acquire new customers reliably in any way, really. Like, AI summaries take away from search. For us, by the way, search customers are very valuable. They convert at high rates to both free and paid subscriptions. Also, they're expanding your universe. Like a lot of what I do is serving readers, and it's very important, by the way, to avoid churn and keep readers happy. But some articles, if it's in kind of the Venn diagram or within the circle, not a Venn diagram yet, we only have one circle, of things that like they already know and expect, you're not going to expand the circle very much, right? Then you might have topics that are like way too far afield. If I would write about like basket weaving or real estate or something, right? Just like not a topic I'm known for. The things on the edge of the circle are often what like yield new customers the most. But look, I think brand is important and the value proposition is important, right? I publish probably less than my peers, right? I want everything to be up to a certain threshold, right? Everything to feel kind of very premium, but it is like a market position. I don't mean it cynically. It's a market position that I think kind of plays to my temperament and my strengths. It is very valuable. When Luka got traded to the Lakers, right? I was playing at some random like poker tournament in Maryland, went really late. My phone was out of battery, and I'm like, am I hallucinating? Right? Did I just see on the ESPN screen that Luka Doncic got traded for Anthony Davis? Right? But when I busted out of the tournament, I came home and like just cranked all night on a post, and it was hard work, right? But get the topic that everyone wants to hear about and to be fast at that is very valuable. But like that requires like blood, sweat, and tears, man. You know, all-nighters and things like that. Yeah,
It's a tough game. Journalism
Yeah.
is a tough game. Now, Google is an interesting one because they have a complicated relationship with your content, for example, because on the one hand, they earn money for viewers that would be hard to get otherwise, searching some random planet, what have you. On the other hand, they are a frontier model company that needs new training data. So they can't have their ecosystem be all AI purveyors, because then they kind of, I don't know, they kind of eat their own seed. Like there's no future training data.
Yeah.
So they have a weird incentive structure where they want humans to produce the content, not AI, because they need future training data.
But don't you think we're past that point?
That is the complexity.
Right.
I don't know. I would think probably we're not past that point, because intuitively, I think, for example, that, okay, Elon hasn't had his day yet in frontier models, but he probably will, because he has chips and power and money, and he's got the Twitter content, which he can wall off from other frontier models, so they can't use it as training data, and he can. And I think that just given how much intellectual energy has been in that Twitterverse for so long, there must be some interesting property there.
Yeah. You're talking about the raw content.
Yeah.
Yeah, utilizing Twitter.
No other frontier model can use Twitter data,
Right.
which I think must be insanely valuable for their training data.
Yeah.
And with YouTube, it was long thought that Google had that fundamental advantage, that they had their YouTube content as training data that no other frontier lab could take advantage of. I don't know if people think that anymore, but it might well be the case that that is a very useful bit of data.
the Twitter algo is pretty good, actually, right? You have to train it. You have to tell them, I don't like this content, but like it hones in on like micro niche interests quite accurately.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know if you. I also kind of wonder if it's listening in
I'm sure
on
it
people. Yeah, no, it is eerie, right? Like sometimes we'll try to like just say a word, like porcupine or something. Like say a word that like only though when I don't have my phone on, I just see if it picks up on that somehow. Like never Google search for porcupine, but just say the word porcupine in conversation. I haven't gotten it to trigger yet, but you never know.
Are you using the For You algorithm, or just your followers, or?
Well, it defaults you very strongly to For You, right? And even like the followers tab is not in chronological order, at least not without like a lot of manipulation. And so like, no, it's kind of, I don't know. I think it's like quite bad in some ways that they've broken that chronological stream, right? Like I was not watching actually. I was on my way to an NBA game when the NBA draft lottery was occurring the other week, right? And like I wanted to know up to the minute where the balls are bouncing, and like it kind of feeds you tweets from like an hour or two ago, and like it's actually not. I know. I think Elon has undermined the value of that brand a lot, right? Maybe chasing short-term gains, or I don't know if he's allegedly in a big like K-hole or something, right? Not really thinking very allegedly. According to the Wall Street Journal, allegedly, some people allege that he may have had alleged use of some things, right? But that was a case of like kind of breaking the core value proposition, like and differentiating feature of an app, right? At the same time, I actually think like the Grok algorithm and like the XAI algorithms for Twitter are actually quite smart. And so it kind of winds up being a case of like two wrongs making a right, sort of, although the business is like losing some steam. But yeah, able to train them like, you know, it kind of makes it ironic. It goes back to like, do you have original data that you can train on, extract from? I mean, we all know people who are in business where they're trying to like find experts that provide original insight, right? I think we were talking about this last night as well. I think people overrate the extent to which AIs in their current state, mid 2026, are actually capable of like extrapolating beyond the data set and being truly generally intelligent, maybe one step beyond, but I think you get deterioration after more than one step, as opposed to like, you can train the fuck out of the data you do have, get some like perfect distillation of like, here is the training set, and I'm going to reduce that down to vectors and be able to do all types of cool things with it, right? But yeah, I do think running out of like original data is meaningful.
You have to keep incentives for humans to produce new and interesting content. I think that you need a lively ecosystem. For me, I don't think we're at the point yet where we can shut down original production and have the frontier models continue to improve in this way. I think it's the same dynamic as like Wall Street or whatever. Like, everyone can't be a passive investor. We don't know whether the market breaks at 30% or 50% or whatever, but you can't have 100% of the people just blindly invest in the S&P index and not invest in price discovery in some way. Like,
You're probably right, yeah.
Some ecosystem argument there. An interesting test of how capable LLMs are at trying to hill climb in areas where hill climbing is not obvious would be if you tried to take what you're doing to a higher level of abstraction and generality and tried to basically train an AI agent, like, this is how you spot opportunity in the content space, and this is how you design a pipeline.
Yeah.
I'm going to sleep. See you in the morning. It would be an interesting project. Like, it might be something that the AI could actually succeed in. Like, this is my objective function. I'm trying to have revenue greater than cost, and this is what a pipeline looks like to get something into production. These are the degrees of freedom. You can do all these different types of content. Here are a bunch of environment variables. Here are the constraints. Go.
Yeah.
I'm going to sleep.
It's interesting you say that because, for a year, our main focus was optimizing cost, essentially, right? So infrastructure, models, how we produce the scripts, how we produce the bullet points, what, are we going to build our own video model, et cetera. And that kind of flipped at some point where, okay, we have this all figured out. Now the difficult thing is, how do we come up with more ideas for channels, right? And because we started duplicating across channels. And so yeah, I think an AI would be good for that. Just sourcing new broad topics and expanding on keyword sets. I think that would be a good agent work, because we had one person full-time doing that. And
so you hire a guy, be like, hey, our median weddings or whatever are quite popular,
right,
planets
yeah.
or okay.
Yeah.
It's a funny thing, because what I'm doing now with AI training, I've found that the people that benefit the most from LLMs are people that are ADD, high intelligence, maybe tend to be a certain personality type, like maybe INTP style, just over explorers. Maybe challenge is that they don't go down the line from A to Z and execute very well. Those types of people benefit a lot from LLMs, because LLMs cover their weaknesses. They make them able to dot the I's and cross the T's and execute down the line. And what I find is that the models have gotten so capable that even for people that over explore or get at ideas, they're then able to execute all of those projects, and the constraint does come back to ideas, where that type of person, that ADD, high intelligence person, usually they have their whole life they've had way too many ideas and way too little time, and now all of a sudden all those things can be accomplished, and the constraint is back to ideas.
I think LLMs they've made products easier to build, but made it more difficult to find a good idea, a good product to actually want to build, right? Because now everybody is capable of being an engineer for the most part, right? So you have 1,000 guys that can build the same thing that before you only had 10 guys that were able to do, right? So my problem is I get a lot of analysis paralysis about this, right? Where I'll have something where like 3 years ago, pre-language models would have been a fantastic idea, right? And I would have 100% built it. But now I find myself thinking, well, is this worth putting time into? Because what is my long-term edge, right? Somebody could, or 100 guys could launch copycats in 3 months, right? They're going to drive price and margin down to zero. Is it even worth spending time on? So, I think about this a lot.
Look, I think there are a few edges that remain for humans, right? One of them is ideas. Some people like the term ideation. I find that kind of jargony, but like, so I've been working for context. So in my job, I use AI in a couple of main ways. One is to just kind of copy edit articles. I write by myself. I'm the main editor, right? I'm typo prone, right? So it's good for like basic typos and fact checking kind of things, right? But the more important use is that I build models, sports models and election models. I know a lot about sports. I know about a lot about model architecture. I'm a quite mediocre programmer, right? So to have a genius programmer all of a sudden, whatever Claude is, tend not pay the expense of Claude and ChatGPT, whatever else, right? Like that's fucking amazing for me, right? It's exactly the skills that like I don't have. Now I can like supercharge becomes less of a constraint, right? However, having been very far down the road of just publishing a World Cup soccer model, for example, when you're really deep in the weeds with stuff and the problems sometimes become more apparent with like context, length and complexity and things like that, it's quite rare for even Claude to have like an aha moment, right? Like all these examples get really wonky and esoteric, right? But like, so if you want some logic, for example, so in World Cup soccer matches, incentives matter. If both teams get to the knockout stage, the playoffs, an American would say, right, with a draw, they'll find a way to draw, right? Now, in each instance of the World Cup model, we're running 100,000 simulations, right? So how can you have like an efficient algorithm to kind of within each simulation calculate a team's incentives, which involve all 48 other teams, and do that in microseconds because you want to do that 100,000 times, right? And update that model within a few minutes, right? Yeah. And like even for like that algorithmic stuff, like I kind of had to come up with some of the ideas for how to like save time and things like that. So ideation. I think judgment / taste is another one. And then like kind of attention to detail, right? Where if you're kind of compressing the huge mass of information and kind of turning it into like this vector crystal, right? There is some information loss, right? It might be kind of the most efficient way to compress that information into a discrete number of vectors, but you do lose some acuity and like, when does that like acuity matter and when doesn't it, right? And so like kind of being able to detect, so in the process of like building this model, I'd say that Claude has introduced, 7 to 10 things that I would consider to be like major bugs, right? My threshold for major is very high, right? Like I think if something's off in the second decimal place and it's like theoretically wrong, like I'm concerned about that. But like, it can kind of cut corners and skirt details. And I think you need like kind of expert level judgment. I mean, I spent probably 10,000 hours building sports models
you need to babysit
in my life, right?
Basically.
You have to babysit it. You have to babysit it and you have to know like, okay, this one thing like bothers me a bit. This feels off. Even though, okay, so now we have Spain ranked at 2,402 instead of 2,043, right? Like that doesn't bother me. But like if something doesn't add up, my instinct for is there a problem in the code? Is it not doing what I told it to do? Or is there a problem with the data? Or yeah, sometimes it's my fault. Sometimes we'll architect a plan that actually is kind of incoherent when you think about it, right? But I've learned you have to pay a huge amount of attention to the small details that feel like a little bit off. It's also like a poker player's instinct where like, it's not quite like, someone blinks their eye at the wrong time and you're like, that's a tell, right? But you're looking for like little signs of like of a deeper problem. It does feel like in the current form, the AIs are like some boiler room that's like a little bit over-engineered in some ways and under-engineered in some ways, right? And all the gears are not perfectly reliable, and it kind of works. But like, I feel like I'm actually more creative in some ways now, because like that's my comparative advantage, and also because like the AIs save a lot of time. There are some tasks that are like 10x to 100x faster. So it might be things like, okay, I'm going to have to take more time for the visual presentation of this, right? Where it's somewhat helpful. It's like helpful for like taking like a program and producing data for charts, right? But like I spend more time on like the aesthetics actually and things like that.
Yeah.
In our LLM chat, Ben Solsky, who might be the consensus #1 poker player of the last 15 years if we took a poll of top players, he has a project that he works somewhat obsessively on, which is using LLMs for the fundamental analysis of investments. And he takes the level of care that you describe, and he has a sensitivity to all of the ways that the LLMs can F up. And it really is quite impressive. It's impressive what he's done to constrain their ability to F up and limit it, but it's also impressive the number of different ways that problems can occur along a pipeline.
Yeah, and having to stay on top of every model every time a new one comes out, and have, introducing that to your workflow. I mean, that's like a full-time job in itself.
And
right?
And the edges are fleeting. In sports betting, whatever, the house takes 4.5% of every bet, right? So if you beat the house by 5%, then you're picking up your pennies or dollars on the ground, right? If you beat it by 4%, not that different. That's 1 out of 100 gain that you're now getting wrong, right? Then you're losing money over the long run. And so like understanding that edges are hard to come by, that they're often fleeting, right? Also, like when you have like an edge, the occasional large edge, you want to press on that now. I probably regret. I guess we all played kind of online poker back in the day, right? There were times when I was like a couple years out of college and like making like $250 an hour fucking pushing buttons and playing party poker. You know what I mean? This is back when $250 an hour actually kind of meant something,
And it
whatever.
was fun.
And it was kind of fun, yeah.
It was fun for me.
And like I would kind of play poker 25 or 30 hours a week, which was a lot. And I'm like, I wish I kind of played
80
hours a week, you know what I mean?
Your brain might be fried. You wouldn't be in the position of...
No, but like as you get more productive, if I can like do something now 50% more efficiently, right? Does that mean I spend 50% less time, or does it mean I spend the same amount of time and now make 1.5x the revenue or whatever, right? Like that's an open question. It's one thing, the world's become much more productive over many years. Like Keynes predicted many years ago, we're going to have like a 14-hour work week, and no, not really. Usually when people are more productive, they work more because they have the incentive to work more. Also, if the bar is higher, to clear that bar becomes harder and harder, I think, right? If you automate the unpleasant tasks, like debugging a program is not a pleasant task, right? Designing charts can be kind of fun, right? Asking like empirical questions about like, oh, I have this idea about how soccer works. Like, let me test this. And now to test it might take 15 minutes to get Claude to do the right test instead of an hour or two coding it myself. And like, that's a big gain, right? That means I have like more ideas per hour that can actually effectuate potentially.
Now, I will say that content is a lot different than the pipeline that like Ben is trying to do or that you're trying to do with the soccer model, in that a pipeline is something where you're trying to get the right answer at the end. And in LLM world, that's always going to be super fucking difficult because you've got a parlay that's like I have my friend who I try to play tennis with and I can't get a game off of him. Why? Because he's so fast that I have to hit 4 great shots in a row, which is a tough parlay to win even a single point. If you want to get through your soccer model, you have 100 things that you have to get right. And even if the LLM is really fucking good, it's still going to trip up along that path. Whereas in content, it's like you can still produce viable slop.
Yes.
If the parlay misses a couple legs.
Yeah. That's because it's not that competitive.
Yeah.
Especially at the long tail, where the content that we were competing for, nobody was producing for. So we had no competitors. So as long as we were able to produce it for cheap and capture that tiny amount of traffic, we knew that we could, make our arbitrage. When it comes to investing, obviously, or building sports models, it's very competitive. Right?
Yeah, and you have an adverse selection problem, right?
Yeah.
If you take like the Kelly criterion as a sports betting formula that says how much to bet, right? If you were to follow that literally, then you would bet on all your bugs, right, and all your like sloppy assumptions and things like that, right? I think Bob Vulgaris told a story about how like years ago, like some intern of his had coded like the 3-letter abbreviation PHL for Philadelphia as like PHI, capital I instead, or vice versa, right? And it was looking up the wrong team code, and that caused all types of problems. You're like, oh man, the Sixers are a great price, man. My model says like wager all on the Sixers. You have to be very careful about that. And likewise in investing, it's like how, that extra marginal detail matters a lot more. And if you ask Claude, right, like I'll have conversations with Claude about Claude, it's like, yeah, sometimes, you're not really the typical use case, right? Like I'm trained on people who want pretty good answers very fast, right? Whereas you want a very good answer and you're willing to stay up all night to get the very good answer so that your model beats Vegas by 1% instead of losing to Vegas by 0.5% kind of thing, right? I want my models, even though we're not betting, I do bet on them a little bit, right? But like we want them to be good enough to like that you can pay a subscription silver bulletin and have a model that compete with actual sports books, right? And like it's a very high bar. We have to be very meticulous, and it's like it's different than when like, do you lose based on your worst ideas or win based on your best ideas, right? Those are very different things. Canonically, AI is better at that latter group, I think.
I love your framework for thinking about the world that you've said in both of your books, where the idea that in hyper-competitive markets, the bad things you do are so much more important than the good things you do. I think that's very, very true. It's like in sports, for example, if you are good at picking a winner in a tennis match, your ROI is plus 3%. But if you find that you're on the wrong side of a tanker match, it's negative 100%. That situation comes up all the time.
Poker too, right? Like, this is more of a cash game profile than a tournament profile, but there are some players who are fantastic players in a cash game when they're on their A game, right? But if they're tilted, if they're drinking, if they just won a bunch of money from a sports bet or lost a bunch of money on Bitcoin, right, or whatever else, right? If you're tilting 20% of the time, right, that's pretty hard to be a winning player in the long run, right? And some of these guys tilt half the time, right? And they'll have this memory of like, okay, like I'm terrific when I need to be, but like it's very costly when you're kind of near the peak of competition. I don't know, me versus the best poker player in the world, well, not Phil Ivey, let's say the best kind of normal poker player in the world, right? Like they're probably like I'm probably making the right decision 70% of the time, and they're doing it 76% of the time, right? You approach the asymptote pretty fast as you get more skilled, I think.
For sure. Have you experimented with high-end slop? Like, have you tried to make high-end video content using AI?
No. So, look, I feel like my whole life I've stayed away from hyper-competitive markets, right? And I try to target, just like poker, table selection, right? You can go and try to battle the guys at 50, 100, or you can make a pretty good living at 510 or 1020, right? So I try to make a pretty good living at 1020 or 510. And, I just haven't tried. I don't even know how you would make money on high-end AI video, honestly. I really have no idea.
I guess it would be one of those things where you would try to get ahead of the curve now and then be making good sci-fi stuff in 3 years, learn about the process and start optimizing the process in a way. But it does seem like it's going to be hyper competitive.
Well, the example that you gave of the who's the guy that you were talking about who had
Julian Goldie,
so that's a pretty good example of I would call that higher end.
For sure.
Yeah, right. Like he's created his own AI avatar. He's created a process to listen for topics and automatically create content off of them. And I'm assuming he feeds it into some sort of monetization, right? I think that's pretty clever. 6 months ago, maybe I would have seen myself doing that. At this point, I don't really want to produce any more AI video for a while, right? But yeah, I mean, something like that would work.
Why aren't you more interested in the idea of basically automating more of what your team does and generalizing it where it's as you sleep, they're doing stuff along those lines, or you think it's impossible?
I think it's from a cost perspective, right? I mean, look, we're looking for an arbitrage. That's really what it is, right? That's what the YouTube slop videos are. And if I don't have a platform where I could distribute and monetize, it's very difficult for me to justify the cost of the videos, right? Especially when you're getting into, higher end production. I mean, I've run C-Dance videos. They're expensive, right? They can cost you anywhere from $5 to $10. I own a furniture e-commerce business, so I messed around with creating product videos. Essentially, what you do is you feed the model an Amazon product page of your product, and it'll create like a 20-second advertisement, and it's really good, right? It'll read the description. It'll take your source photos. It'll create a lifelike video of the content. It'll create a script automatically that says, oh, this is a chair that's blue and velvet and it's very comfortable, and whatever your product description stuff is. But again, it gets pricey, right? So if you have a specific use case like that, where I'm already selling something, right? So that makes sense for me to produce the content. But for me to just produce things without knowing how I'm going to monetize, I just can't, I can't see it.
How does the multi-language stuff work? Like, is there a big market for non-English speaking slop, as it were, or?
I don't know. I really don't know. I haven't looked into. I mean, the obvious market would be Spanish speaking, right? Mm-hmm. I haven't seen anything, right? I haven't really looked into it either.
And all your videos are in English then?
Yeah,
okay.
They're all in English. Yeah.
I remember back in the poker days, when the affiliate was a big thing.
Yeah.
It was Poker News. As I remember it, one of the main things that they did was say that it's not just the U.S. and mm-hmm. they developed content sites that were in other languages. And
that was an amazing business for mm-hmm. publishers back in the day, affiliates. I mean, these guys were making millions of dollars a month just on the back of, rakeback. And that was, an early publishing business for the most part, right? Like, all you had to do was create content for poker players or figure out how to capture poker players through organic search and serve them. I mean, a lot of them were just like aggregators of the sign-up bonus things, right? Mm-hmm. Like that the sites had. And but again, that didn't last forever, right? The sites got banned. People lost their businesses that were making $10 million a year, maybe, right? So that's the difficult part with anything like this. You can make a lot of money really quickly, if you're smart enough to find the edge and willing to pile time and money into scaling, because we spent a lot of money scaling and building out the infrastructure and everything. It was a big bet.
You host your own models, or?
So the video model we used was an open source model called FFmpeg, but we had to configure it to create the type of content that we wanted. When we originally started, we were using a video vendor that pretty much used FFmpeg. It's open source. So we had to rebuild that entire process because we were paying the vendor too much. The voice model, we were originally using OpenAI. I think the cost was about 7 cents a video or something like that. We eventually built our own, right? When you get to that type of scale, you can't, I can't spend 7 cents on 60,000 videos a day. That would be crazy, right? 45K a day, 150,000 a month in voice model costs, right? It's better to just spend the the 30,000 one time and you know, build your own, right? So you know, there was a lot of stuff like that was just like one time fixed engineering costs where, okay, we have to do this. We might even pause video production for the next 2 weeks to get it, you know, to get it done. Because, you know, another thing, things start breaking at some point, right? Like we had, originally we were using, I'm going to say Airtable for a lot of the automation, right? Which worked fine for whatever it was, you know, a couple thousand videos a day, right? 3,000 videos worked fine. 5,000 videos worked fine. 10,000 things start breaking, right? So you start firefighting. You're spending on engineering to fix this thing that you don't know if it's going to scale or not, right? But you're hoping that it does, and you don't have to rebuild it, right? So at 15,000, the thing breaks again. Now you're thinking, okay, should I just spend the time to build a better solution, or should I keep firefighting, right? So there's nonstop this like cost benefit, you know, analysis going through your head where you don't know where you should be spending time or money, and at some point, you know, obviously you're just scaling to such extent that everything breaks and you just need to rebuild from scratch. So, I mean, that was just the process over and over.
I mean, Doyle Brunson's phrase about poker was it's a hard way to make an easy living, and it kind of seems like,
yeah,
like part of the reason you're like kind of self-deprecatingly call it like slop is because like you are working hard, right? I mean, you're doing like serious infrastructure, serious programming, making difficult trade-offs about the business, and like understand these edges might be ephemeral, right? And like that's not that different fundamentally, right?
The worst part about it was I feel like we got sucked into it.
Yeah.
Right? Where it starts so innocently, where you're like, okay, this is a cool tool. Why don't we test it out? Right? So you test it and it works a little bit, and you scale a little more and it works more, and you keep scaling, and then before you know it, you're spending $50,000 a month on engineering, and you're spending on infrastructure, you know, servers, and you're spending on rebuilding models, and you have a ridiculous Gemini spend. You're like, how did this happen, right? But the math at the time is so good that you can't say no to scaling. So you just keep going, right? Because why wouldn't you, right? You'd be an idiot not to take advantage of this arb that you know, this edge that you have right in front of you, right? All you have to do is keep going. And then one day you get blown out by the platform. Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
I mean, most AI engineers are solving the problems, the bottlenecks of the type you're running into by taking a screenshot and saying, Claude, how do I fix this? But your problems are truly unique. You first of all have to assess what the problem is, what broke, and then figure out how to fix it, where no one's fixed a problem quite like that, presumably.
Yeah. Well, we were lucky. We have a very good engineer that we've been working with for 12 years. So he helped rebuild everything. But yeah, I mean, you know, this wasn't the type of, you know, this wasn't me going into Claude and saying, hey, Airtable is breaking. How do I rebuild everything onto a server? Like, you know, this is way over my head. You know, real engineers had to rebuild everything.
I love it.
Yeah.
What do you predict the content markets are like in 2 years? Is too long to predict. Let's say 1 year. I mean, I think we're already at a point where, let's just say AI content is about half of major platforms. That might be overstating it a little bit, but like half is not too bad of an approximation for where we are now. If you're looking at, I don't know, new Spotify, upload, like all the different things, I think maybe it's somewhere between 30 and 50% of uploads. Now views, much less, because people do seemingly have an aversion to AI generated content if they can tell. So maybe those are two distinct questions. Will people be able to tell a year from now, and will AI content continue to grow as share, or do you think the pushback that you've recently experienced is just going to grow and the deplatforming will kind of limit the growth?
I think all those things will happen. The platforms are going to fight back because they have to. They don't have a choice, really, right? I think you'll see exponential growth in this type of content because their incentives will still exist, right? And the cost to produce is going to keep getting driven down, right? So as it gets cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and the quality gets better and better and better, It's going to be tougher to see what's real and what's not. And so I think the platforms have a really tough battle ahead of them, right? Where right now they're taking the stand of, we don't want this on our platform, but at some point, I think 99% of the content is going to be this. So what are they going to do? Ban everybody? Right?
And if you ban everyone, there's always the opportunity for an upstart. Like I was reading recently, there was a AI rock and roll band or whatever that had two.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
And apparently, basically in music, no one wants to listen to AI generated content, but yet in a blind test, I can't tell the difference. Is it most people can't tell the difference?
But like, okay, you could go to Canal Street, which is, if you don't live in New York, right, it's like a cheap kind of, I don't know, tradesman junky shit, right? And like buy a replica of the Mona Lisa, which, might even make improvements on the Mona Lisa from a technical standpoint, right? But like, it's not the Mona Lisa, right? And like, I think, it's easier with like fine art, painting, sculpture, things like that. But like people want the backstory behind that. The backstory often matters more than the technical skill of the art, right? Like, I don't know. I do think like in compressing all this data down to this, again, like crystalline vectorized form, you are kind of losing the differentiating facets that like make humans human, right? Or give people different perspectives and different stories. And now like if you tried to train a transformer model on like turning up the temperature and being more creative and random and inventing a backstory, you might be able to do that. I'm not sure there's a lot of money in that for the labs, right? And so they probably aren't emphasizing that very much. But like the default product is to like smooth out the idiosyncrasies, and like it's often where like voice comes from and where kind of art comes from. I think it's notable to me, the gap between how much AI has improved at writing versus like programming, right? Like that gap has like, it's probably always better at programming, and that gap has grown over time. I think is interesting to me.
Hard to hill climb writing. I think in the data that I've seen is suggestive of the fact that in areas where hill climbing is difficult and there's not a clear optimum, LLMs are still challenged. And right now, the frontier labs are willing to pay any amount of money to get a little bit better at things where the objective functions are unclear, and hill climbing is difficult. Like, how long will it take an LLM to have a funny stand-up set? But it might still not be funny like 5 years from now.
Could be funny now. I don't know. I haven't seen one yet. But if you fed the model, every single stand-up set over the past 30 years of every top comedian, it could probably make a really good stand-up set. It's based on the training.
Yeah, comedy's interesting because it is so
derivative,
right? And like, but it is like, comedians rip off one another's jokes, and that's considered acceptable within certain margins, right? But it's also the person's backstory and the feeling in the room and the way it's delivered, right? And I don't know. I do think people, but like, look, also I operate at like a high end kind of high taste.
For the most part, I agree with you, right? Like, there will always be, and I don't know what you want to call them, personalities or influencers, right? And I think the spread between those people and everybody else is going to widen. I think it's going to be tougher to become one of those people.
Yes.
Because there's so much slop out there, right? Nate, for example, already has his following, right? But if I wanted to build a following like Nate, it's just going to become, so much tougher over the next like years, and increasingly tougher. Yeah. Right. So if you have something already, right, then that's going to become so much more valuable. Yeah.
We were chatting last night about writing and AIs and whether an AI will ever be very good at, say, imitating the style of a great stylist. And I think it's kind of an open question, right? I think they can do a passable job just off the training data before even being optimized in any way. But in a lot of fields like that where verification is difficult and optimization is difficult, they do a great job of getting an 80 out of 100. But doing what Nate's doing, like trying not pressing publish until it's a 99 out of 100, that's where it's difficult.
Yeah.
Well, to some extent, too, what like a truly great writer or a truly skilled craftsperson is trying to do, right? But maybe take writing is you're trying not to be compressible down into some predictable linear set of of algebra, right? Because there are some very popular like political writers who like literally their work could be produced by an LLM because they're so fucking. It's just people who are like very partisan, right? It's like I'm not going to name names, right? But it's so fucking predictable. Then why not automate them, right? I hope that when people read a Nate newsletter, that they're a little bit uncertain about what they're going to achieve, right? And if you ever go to like a, what was it, like Gerhard Richter I saw in where the fuck was I? Milan or something, right? If you see a retrospective of an artist over many years, over 40 years or 50 years, right? There might be like some degree of like repeated tropes and ideas they keep revisiting, but like I think a lot of true like visual artists hate when they get pinned down and characterized, right? And they say, okay, this is what you know me for, and actually I'm going to like totally defy that convention, and yet this thing has this other familiar relationship at some deeper level, and maybe in my 60s or 70s I kind of link these ideas together, and like so they're kind of operating at like at one higher level of abstraction. And I think AI kind of, we were calling it last night, like the depth of field, right? They kind of have this, you're compressing everything into like one or fewer dimensions, right? And so you kind of lose the perspective of, am I looking from really far out at this or really far in? But you are losing some information, you know what I mean? Which in a human term might be kind of correlated with taste and creativity as opposed to technical skill.
Yeah, it could be a long time before the LLM gets there. I mean, I think the average Dave Chappelle joke is not funny. Like if you tried to just distill like the average, but somehow he's able to walk up to the edge of the line and hit repeatedly, read the room in just the right way, read the moment in the culture of the time. Like it's not an easy skill. You could do a passable thing that sounds like, oh, that might be something Dave Chappelle would say. And you can dial up the temperature a little bit, but
Not
dialing
same
up the temperature of an LLM is going to miss in both directions. And
Now, I went to a Chappelle set. I know the people at Comedy Cellar a little bit, right? And like, well, Nate, you should come tonight, right? I mean, Dave's probably going to go on late, right? And like, and so you're there, and this is like a work night for me back when I had like an office job, right? And it gets to be like 12. He goes on like 12:15, right? And 12:30 and 1 o'clock, and like his friend had just died. And was it Charlie Murphy? Is that right? But he was kind of in a mood and like drinking, like smoking cigarettes on stage, right? Yeah. And the show keeps going and keeps going, and like at the Comedy Cellar, it's like actually kind of a cellar, right? It's quite narrow, and like you have to pass right in front of the comedian to exit, and so he was like heckling people who would leave. It's going to be like 3 a.m, 4 a.m. Like don't they have like curfew?
He was going on for hours, really?
And eventually I had to leave, right?
Wow.
But like, trust me, like the 4th hour of drunk Dave Chappelle, the average joke is not particularly good, right? But like somehow it's all part of a process. You know what I mean? It's like someone kind of operating at like maximum efficiency all the time, I think becomes kind of incapable of creativity and like, and you have to kind of like poke around and prod around and say, I'm trying to do X and Y and Z today, right? But like, actually, I discovered this new thing and this is like way more interesting to me now in the moment, right? And like, those are rabbit holes that can be harmful sometimes. So like, to pursue your what your calling is at any given moment, right? That feels like a different type of process, I think.
The other thing with creativity is, I was teaching for years, right? And when you teach a really sharp student, they make subtle, careful adjustments to feedback, which is the right way to proceed. In LLM world, they're basically proceeding with rules. And every once in a while, you make a subtle rule change for your LLM and everything breaks. Mm-hmm. It's a fundamentally different way of giving feedback. Like, I'm giving feedback to the LLM all the time, but the feedback is basically coming in the form of rule revisions, guidance revisions. And a smart student, they're making subtle adjustments just the way you would want them to. An LLM, sometimes you throw a new rule out and you've broken everything.
Yeah.
And you have to figure out why things have broken, but it's somehow your rule has confused them because they've overweighted that rule. The subtle adjustments are not in play.
Yeah, they can be a little myopic for like the last thing that you hear, right? I mean, it's also kind of classically spectrum-y behavior where it's like, okay, well, there are lots of like implicit little rules that people have in social interaction, for example, right? If your friend typically picks you up from the airport, and they don't mind doing that, maybe it's some smaller town, right? But maybe your friend is trying to politely say, I'd really like to not pick you up from the airport today because it's kind of a pain in the ass, right? And you have enough money to afford an Uber, and you're trying to say, no, but I kind of like talking to you, I kind of like the drive home, right? Like there's like a very subtle negotiation, right, that is done through subtleties of language and tone of voice and things like that. And if you kind of like wrote that down, that would be kind of profane, yeah. Right? And like, well, you will pick me up if you don't have to stay late at work and if the Uber costs more than $50, otherwise I will, I'll take the subway. Like picking up on like subtle signals that you don't have to like vectorize, I guess, is like, I don't know, I think quite valuable. At the same time, LLMs are very smart about picking up on like subtle contextual factors. They're very good at like detecting who writes something, for example, at teasing out implicit signals, I suppose.
So is it a lack of creativity or is it a lack of understanding human nuance, right? Where the LLM might not be able to reprocess that command the same way a child might, right? Like you might tell your kid something and they'll think about why you asked that, right? Or, what the second order effects of that are, where the LLM just takes it very literally.
I think that's exactly the problem. It's that the human brain is always layering and reprioritizing in a smart way, trying to look at the big picture and then hone in on fine details. And it's not prone to being either too literal or towards over complexity. It actually wants to simplify things. Whereas the LLM, they are a bit too literal. Like my little agent who helps me be far more productive works great almost all the time. The other day, it broke completely for one small reason. We have like one of my cardinal rules is I don't want you to lose track of anything important admin wise, right? And that's harder than it would seem in LLM agent world. But the triage stuff is the stuff that I have to take care of, maybe the 30 to 50 things that are important on the admin list. And it knows that I don't want stuff to be lost on that triage, and it knows when to add it. And it had taken a small comment that I had, like, don't lose track of these things from calls or whatever, and decided that that meant that it was important enough that they should add that to the triage list each time. So I woke up one day and realized that my triage list was 680 items. They had broken like one of the most important processes of being an agent. And I had to go through and fix it. But that's an example of someone that has a sense of the big picture, the 30,000 foot view, is never going to make that mistake.
Right.
It can only be made by being overly literal.
Because a human being knows how to digest whatever the instructions are and weigh them, right? And maybe that's the issue with the LLM.
And also, a lot of language is not very literal. Like if I'm if I'm your boss, right, and you come in late, and let's say there's a client meeting that morning, I might be like, hey, Brandon, it's not a big deal, but, it's an important meeting. Please try to be in time, right? No biggie. I know you're working hard, right? Depending on your previous interactions with the boss, if your boss is known to be understated, never says anything like that, and is British, say, right? That means it happens again getting fucking fired, right? From someone else, it might really be, hey, we're running a casual business here. It's not as big a deal, right? So I wrote a book called On the Edge in 2024, and then I narrated the audiobook myself in a studio not far from here, for example. I'm like, spoken language and written language are like actually quite profoundly different. You know what I mean? Spoken language with body language attached is like quite profoundly different. Now, like, language is also very rich though, right? There's usually a lot of like redundancy. I guess the term is lossy. There's a lot of redundancy in language. There's like deliberate ambiguity introduced. If I misstate a word, right? If I say, they got a beater on their currency in Canada instead of beaver, right? You understand that was just like a misspoken syllable, and you wouldn't be like, I don't understand what you just meant, right? And like the LLMs are all good at that because they have this like context of like where the text is extracted from. Like the fact that when you're talking to Claude or ChatGPT, having a typo that's a natural typo, like it doesn't get fazed by that at all, right? You might think, oh, computers are very rigid, right? So if I type one word wrong, it won't know what I mean. Like, no, they understand that, like, probabilistically, if I have like one letter wrong or even a word wrong, right, or even kind of state a negative when I meet a positive, like, usually kind of like plow right through that. And it's like very robust in some ways, but yeah.
Well, I know we have a time constraint, so I want to wrap it up, but I thank you guys very much. This was a very fun podcast.
Thanks, Brandon.
Thank you, Brendan.